Dust rolled across the open field as the evening sun turned the sky red and gold. The cattle moved slow toward the watering hole, and the sound of their hooves mixed with the faint whisper of wind brushing dry grass. Ethan Carter, a quiet cowboy with sunburned skin and calm brown eyes, led the herd with the patience of a man who had lived half his life on horseback. He didn't talk much, but everyone in town trusted him. He was steady, careful, and always ready to help anyone in need. That afternoon, the old rancher had asked Ethan to take his daughter along for her first real day on the range. Her name was Claire, a city girl who had only come to stay for the summer. She had fancy boots that still looked too clean, and a hat that didn't quite fit right, but she was eager to learn. She wanted to prove she wasn't just a visitor. She wanted to understand what made the land and its people so strong. The two rode side by side, the horses moving in rhythm through the soft dust. Ethan showed her how to watch the herd, how to spot a stray calf, how to listen for danger. He spoke slow, with that deep cowboy drawl that made his words sound like they carried weight. Claire listened carefully, sometimes smiling when he made small jokes that only someone raised under the open sky would understand. As the sun dipped lower, the air grew cooler. They stopped near a dry creek bed to rest the horses. Ethan tied the reins to a branch and knelt to check a saddle strap. Claire dismounted, brushed her hair back, and looked around at the endless land. It was beautiful, she thought. Wild, wide, and alive. She felt free, but also small in the middle of it all. Suddenly, a strange rustling sound came from behind a fallen log. Claire froze. Ethan noticed her stillness and slowly turned his head. His sharp eyes caught the movement, a faint shimmer of brown and gold scales sliding through the grass. His voice was calm but firm. "Stay still," he said quietly. "Don't move, Miss Claire." She swallowed hard. "What is it?" she whispered. Ethan's hand moved slowly toward his boot where his knife was sheathed. The noise grew louder, and before he could answer, Claire gasped. "Cowboy, why is there a rattlesnake between his legs?" She cried out, her voice high with fear. Ethan didn't flinch. He looked down, and sure enough, the big diamondback had slithered between the legs of his horse, curling close to the shadow. The horse stood tense, ears back, every muscle tight. One wrong move and the creature could strike. "Easy now," Ethan murmured. He spoke softly, not to Claire, but to the horse. "Don't move, boy. We're fine." Claire took a step back, her hands trembling. "Do something," she whispered, afraid even her words might scare the snake. "That's what I'm fixing to do," Ethan said in his calm way. He slowly knelt, drawing the knife from his boot. His movements were slow as the wind itself, not rushing, not jerking. The snake lifted its head, its rattle shaking, the sound sharp and chilling. Claire covered her mouth, her heart pounding so loud she could hear nothing else. Ethan took a breath. He had faced storms, wild horses, and wolves, but he respected every creature of the land. Killing wasn't his first thought, it was his last. The snake was just defending itself. He waited for it to turn, to slide away from the horse's legs, but it didn't. It stayed there as if daring him to move first. The horse twitched, snorting nervously. Claire whispered a prayer, her eyes wide. Ethan shifted slightly, tossing a small stone past the snake to distract it. The snake turned its head, tail rattling louder, giving him one brief moment. In a flash, his knife struck the ground just behind the snake's head. The snake recoiled, hissed, then slithered away into the brush, disappearing as quick as it came. Claire let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "Is it gone?" she asked. "It's gone," Ethan said, standing up and brushing the dust from his jeans. "You did fine." "Didn't move a muscle." She laughed nervously, still shaking. "I don't think I'll ever forget that sound. My heart's still beating like thunder." He gave her a small smile. "That's the land teaching you a lesson. Out here, every sound means something. You listen close, and you'll always be safe." They continued their ride after that, but the mood had changed. Claire kept glancing at the ground, half afraid another snake might appear. But Ethan rode calm, talking softly to keep her mind steady. As they reached the ridge overlooking the ranch, the world seemed peaceful again. The golden fields, the wind in the grass, and the long line of cattle below. When they reached the corral, Ethan helped her down. Her hands were still shaking a little, but she was proud she hadn't screamed more than once. He handed her the reins and said, "You handled yourself well, Miss Claire. Most folks would have run." "I wanted to," she admitted. "But you said not to move, so I didn't." He nodded, impressed. "That's courage, plain and simple." They fed the horses and walked toward the barn. Claire felt different now. The land didn't feel like something distant or dangerous. It felt alive, and she was part of it. She watched Ethan as he cleaned his saddle, his quiet focus steady as always. She thought about how he had stayed so calm with a deadly snake inches away, how his voice had never even shaken. "Weren't you scared?" she asked finally. "Sure," he said, glancing at her with a faint grin. "But being scared's natural. You just can't let it run you." She smiled at that. It sounded like something her father would have said if he'd grown up out here. The ranch lights flickered on as dusk settled. Crickets started singing and the smell of hay and horses filled the cool air. Claire felt tired but alive, like she had learned something she couldn't have found anywhere else. Later, as they walked back toward the ranch house, she looked at the ground and saw a tiny track in the dust. The snake's trail, winding off toward the fence line. She stopped for a moment and whispered, "Thank you, Cowboy." Ethan paused. "For what?" "For not letting me panic. And for saving the horse." He nodded, his hat shadowing his eyes. "That's what we do out here. Watch out for each other." The next morning she woke early and found Ethan already saddling the horses again. The sun rose slow, spilling light across the land. Claire smiled, grabbed her hat, and walked toward him. She wasn't scared anymore. She was ready for another day under the wide sky, learning the rhythm of the world that didn't need words to make sense. And though she would later tell the story in town, how the cowboy stayed calm while a rattlesnake coiled near his horse, it was never a tale of danger for her. It became a memory of respect, courage, and the quiet strength of a man who understood the wild better than anyone she'd ever met. The next morning came bright and clear, with a soft breeze that smelled of sage and sunlight. The sky stretched wide, pale blue above the endless plains. Claire stepped out of the ranch house with her hat slightly crooked and her hair loose from the wind. She could hear the distant sound of cattle and the steady rhythm of hooves against the dry earth. Somewhere beyond the barn, Ethan was already at work. She found him near the fence, hammering a loose board back into place. He looked up as she approached, his face calm as always. "Morning, Miss Claire," he said with that quiet drawl. "Sleep any after yesterday's excitement?" She laughed softly. "Barely. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept hearing that rattle." "You'll get used to it," he said, smiling faintly. "The first scare's always the worst. After that, you just learn to listen better." She watched the way he moved, steady and sure as if every motion had a purpose. He handed her a small tin of nails and said, "If you're wanting to help, hold these." She did, and for the first time she felt like she was part of something real. She liked the sound of the hammer hitting wood, the smell of the sun-baked boards, the closeness of work that required both silence and trust. When they finished fixing the fence, Ethan stood back, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Not bad," he said. "You've got a good hand for ranch work." "I think I'm learning from the best," she replied, half teasing. He gave a soft chuckle and walked toward the horses. They saddled up again to ride out across the southern pasture. There had been word of a calf missing from the herd, and Ethan wanted to check the far gully before noon. Claire followed him through the rolling hills, the sound of their horses echoing faintly in the open air. This time she wasn't nervous. She sat tall, holding the reins like she belonged there. As they rode, Ethan told her stories, quiet tales of the land, the storms he'd seen, the nights he'd spent sleeping under stars brighter than fire. Claire listened with wonder. She had grown up surrounded by walls and lamps and noise. Out here, the silence itself spoke to her. Every gust of wind seemed to carry a secret. After a while, they reached the gully. The ground dipped low and narrow, and small rocks tumbled under their horses' hooves. Ethan lifted a hand for her to stop. He leaned forward, scanning the tracks in the dirt. "Calf came this way," he murmured. "But something else did too." "What do you mean?" she asked, leaning closer. "Look here." He pointed to a print in the soil. Deep, sharp, clawed. "Coyote, maybe too." Her eyes widened. "Will the calf be all right?" "If we're quick, maybe." They urged the horses forward, following the tracks until they heard a faint bleating sound from beyond a cluster of rocks. The calf was trapped, one of its small legs wedged between two stones. It struggled, frightened but alive. Ethan was off his horse in a second. Claire followed, helping him calm the little animal. The calf's eyes were wide with fear, but Ethan's touch was gentle. "Easy now," he whispered. He pried the stones apart just enough to free the leg. The calf stumbled but didn't fall, pressing against Ethan's hand as if it understood. Claire smiled. "You're good with them," she said. "Been doing this all my life," he replied quietly. Sometimes all they need is a calm voice. As they started leading the calf back, Claire noticed movement on the ridge. She pointed. "Look there." Ethan's head turned sharply. Two coyotes stood watching, lean and gray, their eyes glinting in the light. They didn't attack, they were only curious, but Claire's breath caught anyway. She felt that same cold tingle of fear from yesterday. "Don't worry," Ethan said softly. "They won't come close while we're here." They guided the calf back toward the open field. The coyotes vanished over the ridge, and the land grew quiet again. Claire felt her heartbeat slow, replaced by something deeper. A kind of respect for the rhythm of life out here, the way danger and beauty lived side by side. When they reached the ranch, the old rancher was waiting. "You found her," he said with relief, patting the calf's head. "Good work, both of you." "Claire did fine," Ethan said. "Kept her head just like yesterday." The rancher smiled proudly at his daughter. "Seems the land's teaching you faster than I expected." That night after supper, Claire walked out to the porch. The stars had come out, thousands of them, sharp and clear against the dark sky. She wrapped her arms around herself and looked toward the barn, where the faint glow of a lantern still burned. She knew Ethan was probably there, finishing chores as always. Something about that steadiness made her feel safe. She walked quietly toward the barn, the gravel crunching under her boots. Inside, Ethan was brushing down his horse, the big animal breathing slow and peaceful. He turned when he saw her, surprised but not displeased. "Couldn't sleep again?" he asked. She smiled. "I just wanted to thank you. Not just for today, but for teaching me how to be calm." He leaned on the stall door. "You taught yourself that, Claire." "I just told you what the land already knows." She tilted her head. "What does it know?" "That fear don't make you weak. It just reminds you to move careful. Same way the wind bends a tree but never breaks it." She thought about that, letting his words sink in. For a long moment they stood in silence, listening to the soft snorts of the horses and the far-off sound of crickets. She realized she didn't feel like a visitor anymore. This land, wild and open, had started to feel like home. "Do you ever get lonely out here?" she asked. Ethan looked up toward the night sky. "Sometimes. But then I remember, out here you're never truly alone. There's always something alive beside you. The wind, the cattle, the stars. It's enough." She nodded slowly. "I think I understand." The lantern light flickered over their faces, painting shadows across the wooden walls. Ethan finished brushing his horse and put the brush away. When he turned back, Claire was still standing there looking at him with quiet admiration. "You'll make a good rancher one day," he said. She laughed softly. "Maybe, but I'll never forget the rattlesnake," he grinned. "That story'll follow us for years, I reckon." She smiled, feeling the warmth of the moment. "Then I guess I'll just have to live up to it." The next day, Claire helped the ranch hands with morning chores. She carried water, sorted feed, and even learned how to rope under Ethan's watchful eye. She stumbled a few times, but each mistake made her laugh instead of blush. Ethan didn't scold. He just showed her again, patient as always. By the end of the week, the town began to talk about the rancher's daughter who faced down a rattlesnake and rode like she'd been born to it. Claire only smiled when they asked. She knew the real story wasn't about a snake at all. It was about learning courage, about finding calm in fear, and about the quiet cowboy who showed her that strength doesn't have to be loud. On her last evening before returning to the city, she stood by the fence watching the sunset. Ethan rode up beside her, dust rising from his horse's hooves. "Heading out tomorrow?" he asked. "Yes," she said softly, "but I'll come back. I don't think I can stay away from this place for long." He tipped his hat. "The land'll be here waiting." She smiled, her eyes bright with both sadness and peace. "And so will you, I hope." "Always," he said, and meant it. As the sun disappeared and the sky turned deep purple, Claire looked once more across the open fields. The land no longer felt like a stranger. It felt like a heartbeat she carried inside her now, strong, steady, and alive. And somewhere in that wide, wild silence she could almost hear it again. The faint rattle that once made her tremble, now only a reminder of how far she had come.